The ammonia atmosphere of Pelin Trench didn't smell like anything. That was the first wrong detail. Every candidate who had ever dropped into a Class 12 trial noted the smell. Duveth had read 214 intake reports. Every single one mentioned it, sulfur-adjacent, they wrote, or metallic, or like something burnt at low heat. The descriptions varied. The noting of them never did. What happened next I still don't have a unit for. Stay close. The sensor feed was already running when the Vorathi cleared the access corridor. 380 kilograms of hexagonal hide plate crossed the silicate ice floor in the basin below. 4 thermal receptor clusters already sweeping. 58 candidates, among them one unsponsored human, TAH-09, heart rate logged at drop point as 58 beats per minute against the board's minimum readiness threshold of 90, had been in the basin for 4 minutes. The Vorathi had 61 confirmed kills across 14 trial cycles. Its average lock acquisition time was 0.4 of a second. On Cadet Len Arvak, the sensor log showed 4.1 seconds. A failure flag. A second attempt, another failure flag. Then a query the system had never generated. Target classification, unknown. Duveth watched the log scroll and did not move his hand. The Vorathi's receptor clusters were cycling fast, oscillating between acquisition attempts, each one returning the same result, the same absence where a heat signature that looked like something afraid was supposed to be. 52 kilograms of mammal standing in plain sight on the basin floor. No flag, no lock, no category for what she was. At 22 meters, Arvak opened her mouth. The sound Duveth would write subsonic vocalization, estimated 19 to 21 hertz, duration 1.4 seconds in his third report draft, arrived through the Assessor Tier's sensor feed and his secondary claw left the console rim entirely. He did not plan this. His hand simply went to his side. All 4 receptor clusters blanked at once. At 14 meters, the Vorathi broke left. Broke again, ran. 61 confirmed kills. A perfect charge completion record across 14 cycles, and it ran. Arvak watched it go. She rubbed her left wrist once, a thin line of white chalk dust falling to the silicate ice below, and pressed a small tin against her sternum, just for a second. Then she said to no one, to the basin, to the atmosphere that was supposed to kill her before the Vorathi ever found her. That's a noted behavior. Her heart rate, 63 beats per minute. 6 hours before the Vorathi ran. Duveth Aln had a pre-trial routine. It was not a ritual. He was careful to make that distinction in his own thinking, because assessors who developed rituals were assessors who were starting to believe the trial needed them. It was a sequence. Count the candidates. Log the intake vitals. Note any biological anomalies before the drop doors opened. He had run this sequence across 19 trial cycles. He had never had a reason to pause at Step 3. He paused at Step 3. Cadet TAH-09. Len Arvak, female Earth origin upland tundra settlement. The settlement designation was there in the file but meant nothing to him. Unsponsored, which was unusual but not unprecedented. Core temperature at drop point, 35.1 degrees Celsius, within human standard range. Heart rate, 58 beats per minute. The board's psychological readiness threshold for Class 12 trial entry was 90 beats per minute minimum. The reasoning behind the threshold was documented in the intake manual, Section 4, Subsection 1. A candidate registering below 90 beats per minute at drop point was presumed to not fully understand the nature of the threat they were entering. The heart rate was not a performance metric. It was a comprehension check. 58 beats per minute. He looked at it twice. He told himself it was a calibration error. He made a note, sensor verification recommended post-trial, and moved on. Across the intake console from him, monitor clerk Herv reviewed the same readout. Herv was grown lineage, second cycle with the assessment division, and he took notes with 3 styluses simultaneously, a habit that had struck Duveth as excessive in the first cycle and now struck him as simply Herv. He held all 3 styluses together when he was not writing. When he was uncomfortable, he clicked them. He clicked them once now, then stopped, looked at Duveth. Duveth looked at the basin floor, 600 meters below the Assessor Tier walkway, where the drop bay was cycling through its final atmospheric equalization. Neither of them said anything. It was, Duveth thought later, the most honest moment of the morning. The basin floor of Pelin Trench was 14 kilometers of pressure canyon on an ammonia cycle world, and from 600 meters above it, through the observation glass, it looked like the bottom of something. The bioluminescent gases in the atmosphere refracted at floor level into a blue-green peripheral glow. Not light exactly, more like the memory of light, the color you'd see if you pressed on your closed eye. Visibility at floor level, 9 meters maximum. The silicate ice that covered the floor cracked underfoot like thin ceramic, not clean breaks, but the sound of something that had been under pressure too long and finally had permission to give. The ambient temperature at floor level, minus 71 degrees Celsius. The Voratha's operational comfort range sat between minus 90 and minus 40. Every species fielding candidates in this trial sat outside that range. The basin did not care. The drop doors opened at 0600 Academy Standard. 58 candidates descended on 6 staggered drop lines. Duveth watched them resolve on his sensor array heat signatures against the cold floor, each one a small, bright point in the blue-green dark. The Tuvari came in first on the left line. 7 of them bioluminescent skin panels already responding to the atmosphere. The panels worked on a stress cascade mechanism, and the transition from the pressurized intake hold to the open basin had apparently read as a stressor. 2 of the 7 were at half luminescence before the drop line retracted. A third went to half luminescence 30 seconds after landing. Documented. Expected. The intake manual noted it in the species profile. Tuvari candidates may display visible thermal stress response upon basin entry. This is not an indicator of performance capacity. The Greln came in on the right line, 3 of them, dorsal ridges already raised, which was the species' typical defensive posture, and the intake manual's exact words for it were species-typical and operationally suboptimal against a single apex mobile threat. Their compound auditory organs were rotating, listening to a basin that wasn't making sound yet. Arvak came in on the center line, alone because she was the only human candidate and the line assignments were calculated by species group, and human was its own group with 1 member. She landed and did 2 things. She pressed her right heel into the silicate ice, not her toe, her heel, full weight, and held it there for about 2 seconds, listening to what the ice did under that pressure. Then she reached into the breast pocket of her trial suit and took out a small, flat tin, dented on the left corner, its lid worn smooth from repeated use. She pressed it once against her sternum without opening it, not the way you'd check something was still there, the way you'd press a bruise to confirm it's still yours. Then she put it back, and she looked at the basin walls. She did not look up at the observation tier. The unnamed Tuvari candidate nearest her, second from the left on the drop line, panels at 60% luminescence, edged away from Arvak without apparent reason within the first 3 minutes of landing. Not a full retreat, just a few steps casual in the direction of the other Tuvari. Duveth logged it. 6 months later in the post-trial debrief transcript, that candidate would be asked about the movement. She felt like the wrong temperature, the candidate said. The board classified the statement as thermal perception anomaly and did not ask a follow-up question. Duveth read the transcript. He did not classify it as anything, he just read it twice. The data from Arvak's intake sensors printed on the secondary console at 0604 Academy Standard. Her core temperature, 35.1 degrees Celsius. Her heart rate, 58 beats per minute. The board's threshold for psychological readiness to enter a Class 12 trial was 90 beats per minute minimum. The assumption built into that threshold was clear and documented. Anything lower meant the candidate didn't understand what they were entering. 58 beats per minute. Standing on the floor of a pressure canyon at minus 71 degrees Celsius with a 6-hour survival window and a 380-kilogram apex predator cycling through its pressure lock equalization 200 meters to the east. Duveth looked at the number. He looked at the basin floor. He made a note in the secondary log. Human candidate, intake vitals, confirmed sensor calibration post-trial. Then board observer Sen joined the assessor tier feed at drop minus 2 minutes. She was a remote link observer from the certification directorate. Her image arrived on the upper right corner of the observation feed, small and clear. Her voice was level. Her first and only contribution to the pre-trial record was this: confirm human candidate is logged as unsponsored. Duveth confirmed it. Sen did not ask a follow-up question. The Voratha's pressure lock began its final equalization cycle. At 600 meters, Duveth could hear it, not through the observation glass, but through the tier's sensor feed, a low-register vibration that arrived in the bones before it arrived in the ears. Herve clicked his 3 styluses together. Once. Duveth ran the flat edge of his secondary claw along the console rim, a sound like a single struck note. He didn't notice he'd done it. The pressure lock opened at 0611 Academy Standard. The Vorathi cleared the access corridor at full mass. Its hide plates, overlapping hexagonal segments, matte-surfaced, non-reflective in the bioluminescent gaslight, caught no shine as it moved. It moved the way very large things move when they are not performing, with the unhurried certainty of something that has never needed to hurry. Its 4 thermal receptor clusters were already sweeping before it fully cleared the corridor. It knew where the heat was. It was already sorting. The Tuvari broke formation within 2 seconds, all 7 of them in 4 separate directions, which was, as the intake manual noted under the Tuvari species profile, the worst possible response against a single heat-seeking predator. 4 moving heat signatures read as 4 separate targets, each one an acquisition opportunity. Running scattered did not reduce a candidate's thermal profile. It just made the Vorath's target selection feel like choice. The Greln held for exactly 2.1 seconds. Dorsal ridges up, compound auditory organs locked toward the corridor. 2.1 seconds of everything. Their biology had designed them to be in the face of a visible threat. Then they broke. The Tuvari ran, the Greln held, Arvek stood still. 57 candidates were in motion within 8 seconds of the Vorath's release. The basin became a scatter of heat signatures moving away from the access corridor at every angle the floor would allow. The sensor array lit up with movement data. Herv's styluses clicked, once, twice, 3 times in fast succession. Len Arvek did not move. She stood on the silicate ice and watched the Vorathi clear the corridor. Her sensor tag showed 51 kilograms of even, unmoving pressure on the floor. Her heart rate, the secondary console was still feeding live vitals, read 60 beats per minute. Up 2 from intake. 2. The Vorath's thermal array swept the basin. Lock acquisition on the first Tuvari, 4/10 of a second, standard. Lock acquisition on the second Tuvari, 4/10 of a second, standard. The array swept past Arvak's position, 4.1 seconds. A failure flag appeared in the sensor log, a code Duveth had seen generated exactly once before, during a sensor array malfunction in cycle 11. He had been about to reach for the recalibration panel when the log produced a second acquisition attempt, 3.8 seconds. Another failure flag. Then the system generated a query it had never generated in 14 trial cycles. Query target profile unresolved. Duveth's secondary claw found the console rim. He ran it once along the flat edge. He did not count it. The Vorath's array moved on, acquired the third Tuvari in 4/10 of a second, locked, charged. The sound of the charge through the sensor feed was brief. The elimination counter incremented. The number changed from 58 candidates to 57. Arvek watched it happen. She reached into her breast pocket and took out the chalk tin, opened it for the first time, looked at the powder inside, pale, fine, the kind you'd buy in a climbing supply depot, not the kind issued with any trial kit or logged on any equipment manifest. She looked at it for maybe 2 seconds, not assessing, not measuring, just looking. She closed the tin, put it back in her pocket, pressed it once against her sternum. Then she started walking, not away from the Vorathi, toward it, not running. Walking the same heel-first pace she had used when she landed full weight, listening to the silicate ice with every step. Her sensor tag showed 51 kilograms of even, unhurried pressure on the floor. Her heart rate, 61 beats per minute. She was walking toward a 380-kilogram predator that had just taken a candidate in 3.1 seconds, Duveth wrote in his first report draft. Then he crossed it out, because stating the fact did not explain anything about it, and the report format required explanation, and he did not have one. He wrote it again. Herv had gone very still. His 3 styluses were in his hand, not clicking. He was watching the sensor tag that read 51 kilograms moving at a steady pace in the wrong direction. The Vorathi completed its second acquisition, a Tuvari at 140 meters, and swept back toward the center of the basin. Its receptor clusters were still cycling. It found Arvak's position in its sweep, and the failure flag returned immediately, the same code, the same absence. The array lingered. Duveth watched the log timestamp tick forward, 4.1 seconds, 4.2, 4.8. 8 full seconds of attempted acquisition on a target, standing in the open on a flat silicate floor in minus 71 degrees. The query returned. Target profile unresolved. The Vorathi did something Duveth had not logged in 14 cycles of observation. It hesitated, a full 2.2-second behavioral pause. Its Johinj opened and closed, the lateral spread cycling through a partial deployment, the kind it used when a thermal lock had already resolved and the kill was close. But there was no lock. The receptor clusters were oscillating, rapid, irregular, each pass returning the same failure, and the jaw motion had started anyway, some downstream reflex that the body had initiated before the targeting system had given permission. Arvek stopped walking. She was at roughly 60 meters. The sensor array read 51 kilograms of stationary pressure on the floor. Her heart rate, 61 beats per minute. She reached into her breast pocket, took out the chalk tin, and opened it. She dipped her thumb into the powder. She rubbed a thin coat of chalk across the inside of her left wrist. Not a mark, not a pattern, just coverage. A white coat over the pulse point. She looked at the Vorathi. She took one more step forward. No lock, no lock. No lock on a 60-meter target standing in open floor with her thermal profile broadcasting, or not broadcasting, whatever it was she was broadcasting, whatever the sensor array kept reaching for and finding a category it did not contain. Her core temperature hadn't dropped, Duveth would write and cross out and write again. She was standing still in minus 71-degree atmosphere, and her thermal signature was quieter than the baseline. Not absent, not cold. Just not where the array expected to find it. The array was looking for the heat of something afraid. She had not provided it. Herv's secondary claw ran along the bottom edge of his note panel. One pass. He looked at Duveth. Duveth looked at the basin. The Voratha's receptor clusters were still cycling. The failure flag was still returning. The 2.2-second hesitation had stretched to 4 seconds, then 6. The jaw hinge had stopped its partial deployment and closed. The creature stood at roughly 70 meters from Arvak, its hide plates catching no light, its body doing the thing that 380 kilograms of confirmed apex predator does when it encounters, for the first time in 61 kills, something it cannot decide about. No lock on the first sweep, no increment on the counter, no sound from Herv's styluses. The basin floor was very quiet. Somewhere in the eastern half of the basin, 2 Tuvari were running hard. A Greln candidate had found a silicate shelf and pressed against it, dorsal ridges up, compound ears rotating. The counter sat at 56. The trial clock showed 44 minutes elapsed. Arvak had chalk on her wrist, and 60 meters between her and a predator, whose targeting system had filed 4 consecutive failure flags and was still trying. Her heart rate, 61 beats per minute. She held her ground. The Vorathi was still deciding. That was the part Duveth could not file correctly. Not the failed lock, not the hesitation, not the chalk. The deciding. 61 kills and a charge completion record that had never once required a second thought. And here it stood at 70 meters with its receptor clusters cycling, and its jaw hinge still, and its body doing the thing that large, certain things are not supposed to do. It was trying to find her. It kept trying. And she kept not being there, not absent, not cold, just not the shape of thing it had been built to find. The heat of something afraid, she had not provided it. Her heart rate 61 beats per minute, chalk on her wrist, 1 foot slightly forward. The Vorathi moved. Not a charge, not yet. A displacement, the kind of motion that large predators use when their targeting system is uncertain and their proximity instinct hasn't fired yet. It covered 20 meters in the direction of the nearest resolved target, a Greln candidate pressed against a silicate shelf to the east. And the Greln flinched back hard, dorsal ridges flat, compound ears rotating. The Voratha's receptor clusters swept toward it. Lock acquisition, 0.4 of a second. It held the lock for 1.1 seconds, then it swept back to the unresolved query at 60 meters. Failure flag. It swept back to the Greln. Lock 0.4 of a second, held, released, swept again to Arvak. Failure flag. It was cycling between them. Duveth had never seen this. The intake manual had no entry for this. A 380-kilogram apex predator standing in a minus 71-degree canyon running acquisition cycles on 2 targets, one that resolved cleanly, one that didn't, as if it was trying to understand the difference. Herv's hand was flat on the console's surface. Not writing, not clicking, just flat. The Greln candidate made a sound, a low-register distress call, the kind that carried in the basin atmosphere, and the Voratha's receptor clusters locked hard in its direction. Duveth's hand went to the observation panel. The counter was at 56. He watched it. It did not change. The Vorathi broke off the lock, turned back toward Arvak. 55 meters now. It had moved closer during the cycling. Her vitals 61 beats per minute, core temperature unchanged. She took out the chalk tin again. She opened it and looked at the powder for maybe 3 seconds. Not long. The way you look at something you've already decided about, just to confirm the decision still holds. Then she closed the tin, pressed it once against her sternum, and put it back. She took 1 step forward, then another, not running. Still that same unhurried heel-first walk, the silicate ice reading her footfalls to the sensor array as 51 kilograms of even pressure. Her pace was steady, her direction was not in doubt. 45 meters. The Voratha's receptor clusters swept her again. The failure flag returned in under a second now, faster than before, as if the system had cached the absence and was returning it immediately. Known unknown, logged, unresolved, moving closer. Board observer Sen had not spoken on the remote link feed in 9 minutes. Duveth was dimly aware of this in the way you become aware of a sound only after it stops. 40 meters. The Vorath's jaw hinge opened. The lateral spread was measured in the sensor log, 140 degrees of a 210-degree potential range. Not full. Half. The way you'd open a door to look through before you decided whether to walk through it. Arvek kept walking. She walked. She kept walking. 38 meters, and then the Vorath's proximity instinct fired. This was the charge that had ended 61 candidates. Not the hunting charge, not the smooth, acquisition-confirmed run that the manual described under standard threat engagement behavior. This was the other one, the proximity override, the behavioral protocol that engaged when a potential threat entered the 40-meter threshold regardless of lock status, regardless of targeting system confirmation, regardless of anything. The body telling the environment, correct yourself. When the world produces something the targeting system cannot classify, the proximity instinct runs anyway. It has to. That's what it's for. 380 kilograms of certain, hexagonal, 61-kill apex predator, crossing the basin floor at a target it could not find. 28 meters, 22. Arvek opened her mouth. What came out, Duveth would write, subsonic vocalization, estimated 19 to 21 hertz, duration 1.4 seconds in his third report draft, because the sensor array gave him those numbers and the numbers were accurate and they meant nothing. They said nothing about what it felt like to receive that sound through the tier's sensor feed. What came out was not a scream, not a warning call, not anything his training had a column for. It was the frequency of a very old warning, coming from a body that was 52 kilograms of mammal in a trial suit with chalk on her wrist. And it arrived through the sensor feed, and his secondary claw left the console rim entirely, and he simply stood there with his hands at his sides. She never raised her heart rate. She fired, she stood. All 4 receptor clusters blanked, simultaneously, not a failure flag, not an unresolved query. A blank. The log showed them go dark all at once, at 19 meters in the middle of a charge that had never been reversed. At 14 meters, the Vorathi broke left. At 11 meters, it broke again, hard, the hexagonal hide plates grinding against the silicate ice, a sound like a shelf collapsing. And then it ran. It ran. The creature with 61 confirmed kills and a charge completion record, and a jaw hinge rated for 210-degree lateral spread, turned away from 52 kilograms of mammal with chalk on her wrist, and it ran toward the eastern access corridor, and did not slow down. Arvek watched it go. She rubbed her left wrist once. A thin white line of chalk dust falling from her pulse point to the silicate ice below, slow in the cold, slower than it should have been, drifting before it settled. She pressed the tin against her sternum, once. That's a noted behavior, she said, to the basin, to the atmosphere, to nothing. Her heart rate, 63 beats per minute. Duveth had not moved. He would not have been able to say, afterward, how long he stood with his hands at his sides. The sensor log would tell him it was 6 minutes and 3 seconds from the Vorath's reversal to the moment he reached for the console again. But the log was a record of events, not of the time between them. He wrote in his personal log, not the official report, the personal one, the narrow file that no certification board had ever reviewed, a single line. He had written in it 4 times across 19 cycles. Technical observations. Things he wanted to record in plain language before the official framing turned them into something citable. He wrote, "She never raised her heart rate. I keep trying to understand why that is the detail I cannot stop returning to. I think it is because I have spent 19 cycles measuring readiness by the presence of fear. She was ready. The fear was simply not part of her operational architecture." He closed the log. He looked at the basin. Below him, Arvek was walking the perimeter. That same heel-first walk, full weight on each step, listening to what the ice told her. She stopped at a spot near the south wall and held still for a moment, not checking anything visible, not making any move toward the silicate shelf, then stepped on, continued, stopped again 20 meters further east. Same pause, same quality of attention. She was learning the floor. She was learning it the way you learn something you might need to know exactly when you can't think about it. She had been doing this since she landed. Duveth looked at the intake log. He looked at the note he had written at 0604. Sensor verification recommended post-trial. He deleted it. The Grelm candidate who had been against the silicate shelf came out first. Dorsal ridges down, fully down, not the half-lowered position that meant assessing, but the flat-down position that meant the assessment was complete, and the answer was that the prior assumption had been wrong. Duveth had never seen that posture from a Grelm candidate during an active trial. The intake manual described full dorsal ridge lowering as a post-resolution behavior, not a during behavior. Not a behavior that happened while the trial clock was still running. Two of the Tuvari emerged from the eastern silicate shelf shortly after, panels dim, but not black, which meant the stress cascade had partially reversed, which meant their nervous systems were doing the thing they did when a threat had downgraded. The Vorathi was in the eastern access corridor. It was not coming back. The sensor log showed its heat signature stable at the corridor entrance, which was the pressure hold return position, a behavior the manual called post-hunt return, except the hunt had not completed. Duveth checked the manual entry. Post-hunt return behavior indicates predator has exited engagement mode. The manual did not have a sub-entry for what it meant when the predator exited engagement mode without a successful acquisition. He looked at the blank space where the sub-entry would go. In the basin, Arvak had found the spot where the chalk dust had fallen from her wrist. She looked at the thin white line on the silicate ice. Then she stepped over it and kept walking. He wrote the first report draft. Anomalous candidate behavior led to predator disengagement. He looked at the word anomalous. It implied the behavior was incidental, a deviation from some expected course. He deleted it. He wrote the second draft. Candidate demonstrated non-standard threat inversion methodology. He looked at the word methodology. It implied design, deliberate architecture. He didn't know if she designed it. He suspected she had simply known something the trial had never been asked to measure. He deleted it. The third draft took 12 minutes. He filed it at 04:12 Academy Standard, 6 hours after the trial closed. It was 214 words, the shortest report he had written in 19 cycles. He wrote it once, he checked it twice, he filed it. The Vorathi was logged as return to pressure hold via behavioral withdrawal mechanism unresolved. In 14 cycles of trial records, the Vorathi had been logged at trial end in one of two ways. Secured post-trial when the trial window closed before it completed its acquisition run, or active through extraction window when it was still engaged at the 6-hour mark. Returned had never appeared in the log. The board administrator who processed the trial records flagged it as a possible entry error and sent a query to the assessor tier. Duveth confirmed the entry. The administrator processed it without comment. 41 of 58 candidates reached the extraction point at the 6-hour mark. The elimination counter showed 17. The Tuvari had lost 4 of 7. The Greln had lost 1 of 3. The humans had lost none. Board observer Sen filed a post-trial notation. It was 3 lines. Human candidate TAH-09 reached extraction. Performance review, pending classification. Recommend behavioral documentation prior to next assignment. She did not recommend a commendation. She did not recommend an investigation into the Vorathi's behavioral withdrawal. She did not ask, in any recorded format, what 19 to 21 hertz sounds like coming out of a 52-kilogram mammal in -71-degree atmosphere. Duveth read her notation 3 times. He understood, in a way he could not put in the official record, that she was afraid of the answer. The board's protocol review took 11 days. The update was filed at 03:22 Academy Standard on a Tuesday, with no announcement and no commentary attached. Section 9, Subsection 2, Paragraph 4 of the Class 12 Trial Manual now read. Human candidates shall be subject to extended pre-trial intake review including thermal profile documentation and non-standard object inventory. The phrase non-standard object inventory appeared nowhere else in the manual. It had been written because of a 31-gram tin of powdered chalk that had no equipment manifest entry, no tactical classification, and no column in any report format currently in use. It had ended a 14-cycle kill record. Sen filed 3 lines. The board filed a protocol update. Duveth filed 214 words and 1 blank column. The blank column was for the chalk. He had tried 6 different measurement units. None of them were right. You could measure the tin in grams. You could measure the chalk in surface area applied to skin. You could measure the result in acquisition failures per trial, or in the number of seconds the Vorathi's receptor clusters had been dark when it turned and ran. None of those numbers said what the chalk had done. None of them were the unit. He left the column blank. Duveth requested Arvak's post-trial debrief transcript 12 days after the trial closed. He read it in his office with the door shut, which was not a thing he typically did. The interviewing assessor was thorough. Standard questions, standard sequence. At minute 14, the assessor asked, "Were you aware the Vorathi's thermal array had failed to acquire you as a target?" Arvak's response, verbatim as logged, "I was aware it was trying." The assessor asked, "What did you do differently?" The transcript noted a 2.1-second pause. Then, "I didn't do anything differently. I just didn't perform the thing it was looking for." The interviewing assessor wrote, "Candidate response." non-clarifying, and moved to the next question. Duvith read that notation and sat with it for a long time. Non-clarifying, as if the answer had been incomplete, as if what Arvak had said was a partial response that a more cooperative candidate would have expanded. He read the line again. I just didn't perform the thing it was looking for. He read it a third time. And for the first time in 19 cycles, he felt not that the candidate had failed to answer the question, but that the report format itself was the thing that had failed. That the column called Candidate Response had been built to receive a different kind of answer, and Arvak's answer had fit perfectly into a space the column didn't have. Non-clarifying, both things were true at once, that was the part. 6 months after the trial, Duvith walked through the confirmation gallery during the quarterly archive review. He had walked the gallery 31 times in his career. He had never stopped for more than 90 seconds at any case. The gallery was dim-lit, the way it always was. The archive lighting was set low to reduce thermal stress on the preservation cases, and there was no ambient sound, which was the other thing about the gallery, the thing you noticed only after you had been standing in it for a while. No ambient sound. The kind of quiet that a building produces when it has been designed to record things and has learned not to speak. He stopped at case 114 HFY. The chalk tin was inside, lid side up. 31 grams, dented left corner, lid worn smooth from repeated thumb press. The kind sold in earth climbing supply depots. Not issued, not approved, not logged on any equipment manifest from any trial cycle on record. Someone had cleaned the chalk dust off before placing it in the case. Duvith looked at it for a long time. The cleaning was the wrong detail. You don't clean a thing like that. You leave the residue. The chalk dust on the surface of that tin was the record, not the grams, not the object, not the placement in the gallery case. The dust was what had fallen on the silicate floor. The dust was what had covered the inside of her left wrist over her pulse point. The dust was the unit he couldn't file. And someone had pressed it away with a cloth, because the gallery's preservation protocol said objects should be clean, because the protocol had been written before anyone knew there would be an object like this one, because the protocol, like the report format, like the threshold of 90 beats per minute, had been designed before anyone asked what you measure when the thing you are trying to measure doesn't perform the thing you built the measure for. He stood there. The gallery was quiet. The archive lights were low and even. Somewhere in the eastern wing, the climate system ran a slow cycle, and the sound of it, a low, constant pressure, like the world breathing at a frequency just below attention, was the only thing in the building that was not silent. He did not run his secondary claw along the case rim. He thought about it. He did not do it. He filed the report at 0412. He left the chalk column blank. He didn't know what unit to put in it.